All right, today on the Agile Podcast, Michael Iglesias, Senior Test Engineer to the stars.
I don't know what I'm supposed to say.
I don't know either. Man. Yeah, every QA engineer that I know has this story of they hired me on to be a QA engineer, but I'm only doing manual work. A couple months ago, we had a QA engineer who was contracted. He wasn't a permanent employee; he was contracted, and we paid him as a engineer. Way over what we paid the whatever testers. I don't even know what their role was, but he was like, "Hey, if you guys are willing to pay me my rate and I don't ever have to do any engineering work, I'm good with it. But just to let you know, I'm not doing what you guys are paying me to do."
Yeah. Do you think that's because people don't understand what a QA engineer does?
I also think it's part of an issue that is a big part of the issue, because a lot of times they hire a QA engineer and then either the product manager or Scrum Masters are like, okay, it's just another person who just tests, I guess. And they don't really know that they're here to automate tests and have some kind of report that comes out for pretty much anyone at the company to look at, like, oh, these tests are passing or failing for releases and things like that. So I think a lot of times it's just no one's pushing that person to do that. And as long as some testing is getting done, no one really cares, because QA is always in the back burner of most companies.
I think there's a value misunderstanding here. People don't understand the value of a QA engineer. They have testers already. So QA engineer is another label for a tester for them. Your point about metrics, they need to be educated to what these new metrics mean. Like, why is it important? When you look at things in a manner where you can see how many tests were run in a very, very short period of time, they need to understand why we're even doing all of that. Because my experience has been, for the most part, people don't understand the role of a QA engineer. They think that a QA engineer is just nothing different than a tester.
Yeah.
And that's why when they hire somebody, they think it's a tester. They just like to call themselves a QA engineer, but that's what they do, is just test, which is manual testing. What I'm saying really is the value of automation testing is not fully understood out there. Mm-hmm. There are exceptions. There are, of course, some companies that are more progressive, but most companies don't really understand it.
When I was a manager, I know that I would constantly have the argument with development of, why would I pay for a QA person that costs this much? It has nothing to do with what the actual job title or what's involved in the job role. If you take a person that's gone through any kind of Scrum training, product owner, Scrum Master certification, whatever it is, they know that having QA automation rolled into the process is sort of assumed in all those trainings. Oh, of course you've got tests that are happening every time your release pipeline runs, and all the battery of your tests are being run every time a release pipeline runs. Of course. Who would not have it be like that? Yeah. I only bring it up because there was a stark difference when I was under development's budget versus when I was not under development's budget. Because when I was under development's budget, it's not the same now because development resources are like way in the stratosphere now. But back when I was a manager, it was like, oh my God, $100 an hour for a QA person, heart attack or whatever.
If you fast forward to today, what is happening today is really not that different. I think today you're still seeing people that don't understand the value of a QA engineer saying exactly that. It's like, why are we paying more for a QA engineer than we can get? We can get a QA tester, which is manual, right, for X, and we're paying X over here, right?
Yeah.
Why are we doing that? Because they just don't understand it, I guess.
Again, for a typical development manager, it will be a hard sell for them to have basically anybody who's under the banner of QA get paid more than the developer. I'm not saying there's not ego involved in it. You know what I mean? I'm not saying there's not a little bit of like, why should they? You know what I mean? But right. Like, if you have junior developers on the team and then you have like a senior automation engineer on the team, that's the market, man. Like, who are you mad at that point? A junior Android developer. Maybe you can pick one of those up for $80,000 or whatever. But your QA developers are all clearing six figures. And you're mad about that for some reason. I'll probably cut all this out because I don't really have a point of where this is going.
I think we're talking about misunderstanding of the value, really. When it comes down to it, you could unitize it and say, you got to test QA tester who can test how many cases per day, right? And you've got an automation tester. They're going to spend time writing the scripts up front, and then at the click of a button, they can be testing 100 cases, right?
Yeah. I think in addition to them knowing how to write automated tests, the other knowledge that's not shown very much is that the knowledge of just testing in general, because developers sometimes they don't know the difference between like integration, unit, and end-to-end tests and things like that. They don't have as much knowledge as a QA engineer would have in terms of just testing in general. And I think that's missed a lot when you're hiring someone that's an engineer for QA and you think all they're doing is just writing random little UI tests, but they're doing a lot more with data and things like that is not being in the limelight of what they really do.
Yeah, that's a valid. But testing in a bigger context as well as, like you said, integration, right? So it's the scope of testing that's different as well, right?
You'll find that like the podcast kind of goes like this. I start off with things that I want to talk about, but then you say things, and I'm like, wow, these are all garbage. Let's talk about that. Yeah, like you can have a whole army of manual people who give you confidence once, but then your one automation person basically gives you confidence every time you make a change. They give you full confidence in whatever the battery of agreed upon tests are, whatever that is. It could be 5 tests, it could be 50 tests, it could be 500 tests. Because we did a whole episode on integration tests, like the importance of. Well, we did a UAT episode basically, and it was talking about you can have somebody come in and test individual changes, but unless you're coming in and testing the entire system as a system, how all the pieces integrate, like basically what we would think of as like integration testing. Oh, let me take your one little piece that you changed, and now let me drop it into the entire ecosystem of your software. Oh, do you have some tests that run at the ecosystem level, or are they all one little tiny form or one little tiny area of your code that changed? Those are different tests.
So it's all about coverage at this stage, right?
Maybe.
Who knows?
I don't really have a place where I'm going with this. Yeah, I guess I should actually pivot to one of the real topics.
We have some?
Yeah.
Okay. No, just kidding.
Michael, I have this idea.
Okay.
All right. When we were talking before we started, I'm going to retread that so I can pitch this idea. I've been deployed as a product owner for the majority of the past year, and I was a product owner at a pretty small company. And I told the CTO at the time, I was like, they will not find the body if you tell anyone that I have done this. But on hours after work, I wrote a little script with Python and Selenium that pulled their site up, logged in their site with the administrative credentials, and it did some stuff with configurations just to kind of like shake down what somebody who is an administrator of the system would want to shake down when a new release comes out, that you can still configure and administrate and stuff like that. Because I was a product owner, so I had to do it every time a new release came out. So I was like, I'm kind of sick of doing these manual steps over and over again. And I just took a couple hours. It was after like 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. Put my headphones on, kind of went into the zone, started from scratch with Python. And by about, 11:30, midnight, something like that, I had this script that basically logged into the site, passed the credentials, the little administrative credentials in, and went through this whole little process. So I have this theory that creativity happens in those little times when you can be alone with like your headphones on without anyone disturbing you or be like, hey, let me send you a quick email. Hey, let me send you a quick Slack message. I would like to put it into actual, like, take it somewhere with a podcast and actually like proof it out to try to figure out how to help people understand how to explore that creative impulse more. But I haven't quite figured out how to do it. But I have this idea that like you need to be left alone for a certain amount of time in order to be creative.
It's a gestation period, right, for creativity to kind of formulate.
I think especially with the whole COVID thing happening, I think people have gotten that a lot more since everyone started working from home, and a lot of companies are incentivizing work from home now. So I feel like that's helping a bit. Definitely getting them away from the office nonsense.
Hey, buddy. Hey, guy.
Oh, this is burning today. Can you come work over here on this instead today?
Man. That's collaboration. That's not a problem to, come over and sit with another person. And that's how team members learn. Especially that's how junior team members learn. You have to code with somebody else who's been there, or when you're in that part of the code that maybe and other people don't know, you got to sit together. That's cool. That's no problem. But when you're given a task and you're like, oh, I need to make some progress. The way I work, I need to be left alone, and I need to close my email, turn off whatever is going to pop up on my screen, and focus on the task for, I don't know what the optimum time is. For me, I want to say it's somewhere between 90 minutes and 2 hours. Because after that, I got to get up and move around. I got to go to the bathroom. I need to refill my drink. I need another coffee.
I can certainly understand. You need some quiet time to actually focus. But then I've had success with some teams that basically they get together on a given problem and they all watch one screen and somebody's the hands-on keyboard, but they're not necessarily the originator, or they're simply just the typist. But everybody's contributing. So somebody's saying something, someone else is countering that maybe or helping it, and they move the problem along. And I find that the end result is achieved in a much more time compressed manner, because you've now got the benefit of having multiple eyes, multiple minds on the same problem. But I'm like you, if I have something to do, I need to do that myself. Basically just sit there quietly. My time frame is a little bit shorter than yours. 45 minutes to an hour, I sit there and try and work on it. But that's typically things that I know I have to get done.
Yeah.
If it's a problem at the team level, share your screen. We're remote now, so share your screen. Used to be great when we were in person because you'd have shoulder time, as I call it. As somebody would come and stand next to you, right? And they would make comments on what you're typing. And it's not that they're commenting on your work, because the work is collective. It isn't one person's work. But the end result gets to be a better result and, I dare say, faster, right? Overall.
I don't know if I want to challenge this, or I don't know where I want to go.
Jack Nicholson thing. He's like, he has that stoop and he lowers his voice, right?
I don't know where I want to go with this, because if I was starting from scratch, I would think that it would be super distracting. I would think that I would need to put some time in first. I'll go off and I'll do some stuff on my own for a little while. And then once I've done a little bit of stuff, like not gone off on the deep end where I've written 10,000 lines of code or whatever, I'll write a little bit of stuff, and then I'll bring somebody in and be like, all right, this is how this works. Can you follow it? And then they'll be like, oh, yeah, I can follow it. And then I know I'm on the right track. Or, well, this doesn't, why did you do it this way? This doesn't make sense or whatever.
Yeah, I mean there's no right or wrong answer here.
You kind of do need some team dynamic in that instance, because you're like showing somebody else your code. That's a pretty personal thing.
It is. You're vulnerable at that point. So
yeah.
there's no right or wrong, in my opinion. I mean, here you could start something off, especially if you have junior people that are just gonna not say very much because they're junior, right? Or the flip side of it is everybody just starts with a blank slate, and that way you have innovation happening. You don't have groupthink, because now Brian's already started this. I'm not going to challenge him. He knows best.
Yeah.
So I'm going to follow along.
I can see that.
That way, you're only following one line of thought, as opposed to somebody else who's going to say at the beginning of it, why don't we try it this way? And then someone else can challenge that in a healthy way. I think there's merit either way, really.
Yeah.
I also think it depends on the person, because everyone kind of works and learns differently. So it really just kind of depends on the people working together.
Yeah, I could see that. That's kind of where I think we're going with this, which is you kind of need to know your team members. If you start your sprint, day one you start your sprint, you know that this one person is going to grab their task and they just need to go off in a corner. Give them an hour and a half. Whatever. It could be a half a day. I don't know. Whatever. Right. Give them a couple hours, let them figure it out, and then we'll all sync up midday or near the end of the day to kind of talk about what our plan is. When we worked together, we did planning both ways. We did planning all together. We were actually sitting together planning how we were going to do things. And we also did planning where everyone was kind of separate, and you just kind of once you did the planning, you kind of ran your plan by everybody else before you went too far down the deep end.
Yeah. My last team, they would do something similar to what you said. Somebody would own a task, they would go away and do it. If they didn't complete it, they would come back, and somebody else who's working on their task becomes free because they finished, right? And then they just say, hey, I'm available. So then they join this other person, but by that stage, the other person's already set a direction, but all feedback is welcome. So they'll hear everybody's point of view, and, oh yeah, but we've already invested this much here. Maybe next time we'll do it differently. So I've seen that as well. The other thing I've seen is right from the get-go. This one team I was on, what they would do is look at an issue and say, who can help with this? And then 2 or 3 people put their hands up. They all get together and they brainstorm. So there's not a line of code written yet.
Yeah.
It's just approach. They're talking about how we're going to approach this. And there's different points of view, and they talk it out, and finally they land on one. And then they'll say, okay, you go do this, I go do this, etc. I want to talk about that in the context of a spike. When you have a spike, it probably is best if a single person goes off and runs with it, because you don't want directions everywhere when it's research, because it's endless.
How do you handle spikes? How do you guys handle spikes?
When you say handle, what do you mean?
Well, yeah. What do I mean? I don't know. Let's pretend I'm the Scrum Master. Well, actually, it'd be better if I was a product owner, because the product owner, this is a question that will come from the product owner, unless you got a terrible Scrum Master, which will be, how long is it going to take you to do that spike work? Are you going offline for 2 days doing this spike work? Because maybe as a product owner, maybe it's not as important to me if you're going to be burning 2 days to try to figure this out.
It's a terrible Scrum Master who thinks that. They're not even a Scrum Master, I would say.
Right.
They're probably like a Task Master or something, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, to the product owner issue that you raise, or not issue, but topic, it makes sense for them to just be curious. They don't really care if you're going to spend 2 days, but look, if I'm going to split the atom with my bare hands, it might take me a bit longer than 2 days.
Well, they
right?
may not care, but they know what other priorities they have in the backlog. The reason I bring it up is because I've seen it handled different ways. I've seen it handled of put it in with a size, and you'll just kind of take whatever time you need to do it within reason of a normal story, where a normal story, if it's taking more than a day to knock it out, it's a little bigger than whatever size that I'm comfortable with for my teams. The other way I've seen it is if it takes more than a day or two for the product owner, the product owner, have to weigh that against the other priorities I have. If it's so nebulous that you don't know, and it's going to take you days to figure out, for me, that not knowing makes it lower in priority to the other things that I have. I know without a real example, this is a terrible. I probably could think for a minute and give you a real concrete example.
Yeah, but so it adds to the risk, doesn't it, really? Because the longer you take to figure something out, the riskier it is, because you don't know what you don't know. You're going to find things out, and then you go down a series of rabbit holes there, right? Yeah. So product owner is in a position to decide, do they want the team to even work on this? Because we don't know enough about it. Maybe break up the work even more granularly, so you could handle it more like bite-sized chunks. But on the other hand, what if that piece of work was important to the product owner, right? And they want you to work on it as a team. You have to do the spike. And at that point, it becomes a negotiation with this product owner to say, we don't know if we can deliver the actual story that you asked for in this sprint, but we're going to have to do the research, whether we do it this sprint or the next sprint or the sprint after. So can we do the research first? And then we'll see. But we'll try to break it down, so we'll give you value at the end of every sprint. That's the only thing I can offer here. If it's that big, you really don't know. It's huge.
I need a better deliverable on this topic. I need the product owner in me is going to dig harder for this one. I'm thinking of a concrete example I can give you, so we're not so meta with this whole thing. A team one time, we had to bring on additional users, and the database didn't scale very well. So I was like, well, what can you guys do to allow me to bring on, X percentage more users, 40% more users or whatever in the next 3 months? Can you do something with database connections? Can you do something with how we're dealing with the back-end services? What can you do? Well, we need to do a spike test to do some investigation to figure out how our code is handling, what the delay is in the code, basically, because nobody really knew. But when I give the team that leeway to go into spike territory, are they just going to hold the task open and hold somebody's time for the entire sprint? I need to know, how are you going to handle that? Are you going to put points to the spike story? Or are you just going to time box the spike story? What is the strategy?
You went there. Okay, so first of all, a spike is work.
Yeah.
So if it's work, right, it's consuming capacity in the sprint.
Yes.
Therefore, it should be visible, it should be estimated, and it should be on the board. You can't just say, we're doing a spike. We'll let you know when we get done.
Yeah.
That's like flying under the radar and doing secret work, right? No.
We'll let you know, Mr. Product Owner.
Yeah. We'll let you know.
Yeah,
we
get out of my office.
I'll
let you know.
It's like, no. You will work on this for a period of time, and let's talk about it. So I think that goes back to some of the things we were talking about before we started is, should a product owner be at your stand-ups? Why not? They'll find out about it because they can watch and learn from what people are speaking about. So the spike will be discussed, hopefully, and they'll learn that the spike is either going well and will conclude soon, like most spikes should, or it just keeps going on and on like a zombie spike. Like, no, stop that. When I was a product owner, one of the things I always had my eye on is, is the team making the work visible at all times? Because you sometimes get people that say, I'm still working on that. It's like, if you're having challenges, speak up. Somebody can swarm with you on that. But don't just say, I'm working on it when you're really stuck. And some individuals will do that because they feel like it's a personal challenge to them if they have to admit that they're having an issue. For some reason, they feel like it's frowned upon if they said, I need help here, because they don't want to sort of ask for help. And my whole thing was, asking for help should be the easiest thing. Like, just ask, right? Somebody may have the answer in the team. So they may say, oh yeah, try this, or let me work with you on that because I have a few spare cycles, right? Whatever. So I'm always, as a product owner, looking for that. But when a spike goes on for more than a day, I always say, well, was that really a spike? That's too big. Spike is something you need to go figure out quickly, and don't hide behind it for more than a day. A day, to be honest, is at the outset for a spike for me. Because think about that. That's 6 hours of a person's work on a given day that they're just doing research on. If you've not landed somewhere in 6 hours, then the problem is huge. It's like you're trying to solve world hunger.
I was going to say, you've not inherited somebody else's code.
Well, that's not a spike. Somebody else's code, when you inherit that's a risk, my man. Right?
Yeah, you're right.
It's so much easier to write new code, we all know this, right? Than to decipher somebody else's code. The best thing you do is throw it away.
I mean, I'm all for it. Like you heard it here first. Om suggests throwing away everyone else's code.
If it hasn't been written well and understandable, then
just don't do it. I feel like the thing that I've taken out of that is you should be checking back in every day. There should be some kind of progress with your spike work every single day. Again, to take it back to the point that I took it back to before we started this discussion. Oh man, we went back like 3 times. Your PO should be in your stand-up, because in your stand-up, the developers are going to be talking about why the spike story moved or didn't move. And then you're going to be able to say, well, depending, like, based on what I'm hearing, the priority of this item is moving or not, or maybe the spike work is done because now they have a good theory about what they want to do, and the spike work gets replaced by an actual story in the backlog. We have the theory that the database is slow because this thing is wrong or whatever. Cool. You've done enough. Let me create a story to go refactor this connections or whatever it is. I have no idea what it would be. This theoretical example I just made up.
But however, right, as a good product owner, you should be open to letting the team experiment. Because, like in that example, the database is too slow because whatever, right? So the question a product owner would ask is, what can you try? Not what's going to solve the problem, because we don't know what's going to solve the problem yet. Maybe it's because we need to add an index. So the team could say, well, we're going to add an index and try it. Oh, that's an experiment. Try it. It won't take long. Try it and see what happens. Try it before, try it after, and do comparisons. You got to encourage that, though. That's what I feel, anyway.
All the indexes. All index everything.
Just delete all foreign keys. That'll solve everything.
If there's one thing I'm sure of, is that nobody understands database performance optimization. That's my retirement plan, Om. You just hit on my retirement plan.
Oh, goodness.
Database optimization. Nobody understands that stuff. Just like network switching and resourcing of platforms.
It was always a dark science to begin with, because most people didn't really understand it.
Yeah.
And now it's even worse.
That's how I got my start. I got my start because I knew something about networking and hardware and infrastructure. And the company was like, oh, you know about how to provision. Well, now they call it provisioning environments. Yeah. That's not what it was called back in the day. It was just called hardware. Right? Yeah. Oh, you know about hardware. Because hardware included like the actual maintenance of the servers themselves, keeping them online, upgrading them, keeping them running, replacing hard drives when they die out or whatever. Network switches, cabling, all that just roll under, air quotes, hardware. But now there's other names for it because it's partially all done virtually. And that's just big business.
Just took me back to the days when I used to work with Novell Networks back in the day. We also didn't talk about this whole idea of keeping your tools sharpened, making sure that you're learning the latest and greatest tools that are out there as a QA engineer.
Well, really, it could be a QA engineer or it could be a person on development. It really doesn't matter. Anybody on the team this applies to. So this is under the banner of continuous learning, which is how do you deal with the need to continuously learn to get better at your work, basically.
Yeah. For me, it's always been, there's always a new problem that requires some creativity and some looking up new things, because whatever is either in place or just there's nothing in place, so I need to learn whatever it is that I'm being tasked with to do.
Yeah.
And I guess that kind of depends on what you're working on, because I feel like we're not just QA people, but developers who are just working in a specific coding language like React or something. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they're blocked by learning new things because they're stuck on an older version that requires all this refactoring that they can't move on to solving the issues that they really want to solve.
Right. So yeah, the Java problem. Like, nope, get 25 lines of code to do a simple, no, can't do it. or as an iOS developer will say, too complicated, not doing it. It's my dig at iOS developers right there.
As a COBOL developer would say, 3,000 lines later, we're just getting started.
When I was learning Python, I couldn't believe it. It was like 2 lines to save something. I was like, 2 lines?
Try doing that in Perl.
No. I don't want to, and you can't make me. So this is one of the things we were talking about when we started, which was anybody's going to be like, oh, well, of course you got to keep learning new things. But in the course of doing your job, the stuff is either baked into the time in your day or you're just working extra hours to learn new things. To me, that's the difference between like good workplaces and bad workplaces. Because the bad workplaces are like, what did you do with every minute of your 8 hours? Like, dude, you gave me a problem that no one's ever solved before, and I had to solve it from scratch. Like,
oftentimes you see the latter of the two options, right? Yeah. People work extra hours because they're really genuinely interested in learning about something new, not just because it's called for, for this particular issue at work, etc. They're learning because they want to keep their skills sharp, right? They're interested. That's why they're doing this. But yeah, to your point, good organizations will give you the latitude to spend some time building up your toolkit so that you can be more effective going forward. There are very few that recognize that formally. There are a lot out there that recognize it informally by saying, we have a code camp happening in 3 months. We'll give you a day or two to kind of just do that.
No, and you know what? What's funny is even in the organization where we work together, there was no time in the schedule for that. I as a manager, made time for that. You'd be like, oh, Michael, go figure this out. Go figure out how to program in Java. Figure out how to integrate with Selenium and do whatever to do this one thing, because that was our goal. What was the Appium? Appium was what we were just like. Oh, we need something that's free because we have no budget and we're not going to get any because development's like, why would I spend money on you? We have to figure something out that's free for us. But like that in that organization, it's not like, well, it was a learning organization and there was tolerance for a specific amount of time or a specific amount of hours, or the Spotify model, for example. Like whenever people quote the Spotify model, they're like, oh, once every, I can't remember in the Spotify model the exact amount of time, but it was something like every 2 weeks for 1 day, the last day of the sprint or whatever. I can't remember what it was. Everyone just worked the entire day on whatever they wanted to work on. Doesn't matter if it was product related or not product related. Some people took the time to try new things with the product. Some people just worked on skills for themselves. But it basically was like a learning day that you did whatever you want. But like for us, for me especially, that was always a point of contention with my management, was in order to execute the things that the leadership wants to do, I have to free up my people a certain percentage of the time to keep their skills sharp, to keep them ahead. Because the management is always asking us, see, I said management, not leadership. Is important, by the way, because the management is asking us to do things that nobody can do. Nobody's ever done here before, and nobody knows how to do them. You know.
Yeah, so you just opened up a whole world there. So here's the thing.
I know I didn't stay on the topic at all.
And that's fine. So learning organizations, right? I'm sure some of the viewers out there have heard of Peter Senge and his whole learning organizations thing. There are very, very few that are out there that are truly called learning organizations. Everybody's focused on the task at hand. Give me something I need that I can monetize today. So if you're learning, how is that making me money or saving me money? Well, it will, right? No, I want to know now on this project. But it will, so that's someone else's project, not my project. And that's that fallacy of compartmentalization in the organization. As a product owner or whoever, I'm saying my project can't be wasting, in quotes, time on learning because I need to deliver. And yes, learning is great for some other project for the same company, but I'm not incented on that project. I'm getting paid on this one, right? Yeah. My bonus is hinged on this one. So I want people to just keep cracking out code and whatever. That's the big difference. So yes, Spotify started that, but as everybody knows, Spotify is not doing the Spotify model anymore. No. Google, on the other hand, they have those, what they call innovation days on Fridays. Don't know if it's every Friday or every nth Friday, whatever it is. On a Friday, all Google employees, or the coders rather, wouldn't necessarily be working on the project at hand. They would just simply work on something where they're doing it for fun, learning, and they incentivize this because out of that will come something that might potentially be useful. Mm-hmm. And off the top of my head, I can't think of it. There are some really poignant examples of that where people just were playing, quote unquote, right? Mm. And they came up with something and Google was able to say, oh yeah, we can weave that into an actual usable feature. Yeah. Whereas if you started to develop that feature, it would take you a lot longer than one day to get there.
Right.
So yes, there are those organizations out there, but it's very few. Most are just focused on the near term, which is this product here and now in my budget, not what's good for the whole.
But Michael, you have to do this stuff on a daily, potentially could be daily basis. At least once every couple weeks, you have to figure out how to learn something and weave that in and not miss any of your dates. And you know what I mean? Or even like if you are missing dates, you have to be like, look, there's a reason I'm doing this. Just be okay with it. And you have to like make that case.
Or he's working every weekend. I don't know. Just kidding. Just kidding.
I mean, that's the trade-off. The trade-off is they don't give you time to do that, and then you have to do it on your nights and weekends, and then next thing you know, you're looking for another job.
I guess in both my current and previous job, that's been pretty consistent with me constantly trying to upgrade the QA automation environment, basically completely. My previous job, it was mostly me trying to get all the pipelines going because there was like nothing in place for there was stuff in place, but it was trash. So I had to basically make a way to provision all of the Selenium machines and all that, and basically figure all that out, how to do all of that the best way that I can do it while still doing sprint work. So for me, I managed to just make doing sprint work very easy so that I had extra time during my day to do that kind of thing and show that I have all these capabilities of bringing this kind of benefit to the company. Like if I just had more time to do these kind of things, it would benefit us in the long run.
Yeah. I did that a lot when I was a product owner. Different models call this architectural runway, or they call it technical debt, or whatever they call it. Like it doesn't matter. It's all the same thing. And product owners have a very difficult time. A very difficult time with this concept because different product owners have different levels of technical expertise. That's a nice way to put it. I've worked with some product owners that once you start talking about like, well, the environment won't support and blah, and the database needs to be refactored to do whatever, like, like you might as well be launching rockets to space, dude. They have no idea what you're talking about. I mean and that's not a dig on them. Like they're not necessarily there because they understand all the implementation of every single piece of technology. They're mainly there so they can help link us to the business. And hopefully they're willing to be open to learning like how the technology helps to do that. But yeah, man, I've worked with some product owners that are like, what are you, what? I don't want to talk about any of that.
Yeah, don't bamboozle me with all that technical mumbo jumbo, right? Just get it done.
Yeah, just get it done. Like, well, I can't get it done because every time I pass something in this environment, it takes me 45 seconds to get a response, and it's timing out all my garbage. If we migrate, I did that one time with a stage environment. Like, we need to throw all these stage environments away and rebuild them completely from scratch with these new modern environments that are, have more space and respond faster and do whatever. Like, as a product owner, you're like, why am I paying for that? I don't care about any of that.
Oh my God, yes, that's so true. So here's the thing. I'm on the fence right now because being a product owner and not being a product owner has really changed my belief. So before I became a product owner, I was thinking, why don't they get it? Right? The tech team's telling them this. And then I sat in that role, but I did have the added benefit of being able to understand some of the technology. But fast forward now, I'm back again on the tech side as an Agile coach, and now we have a product owner, and they go and deliver these dates to the business, to their leadership. This is when we're doing things. This is it. And so then those dates become absolutely sacrosanct. You have to protect those dates because they've already committed. It's like, yeah, but now here's fresh new learning. The team just found out we cannot go live when we thought we could because, and we should have known better, we didn't. Hindsight is always like that. But now we've just learned that personal data cannot be housed in our system because it's located in Germany. And we have these GDPR rules, right? Which the product owner is just like, what is that? It's like, okay, well, let me explain. So when we explained, they said, yeah, can we deal with that later? It's like, no. That's like a violation, right? We cannot just go live and then deal with it later, right? Because the organization is now facing a liability, right? And it's a huge liability. You'd rather not go live than face that liability, to be honest, because all it takes is one lawsuit, and the reputational damage is many-fold bigger than the risk of slipping by 3 months, whatever it is, right? So that realization took time. They didn't get it, and they were just like protecting the date. And it's like, no, we cannot do this. And long story short, the project ended up taking 3 months longer because the data center had to be relocated into Northern Ireland, away from Germany, so that we could be compliant with this rule. So my point of all this, which I'm already losing track of, is the product owners really need help from the teams. So for us to say they don't get it is one thing, but they don't get it. That's not their role to be technically savvy. Their role is to be business savvy, right? So to the extent we can, we should help them. But they also need to be willing to listen. Don't just say, you gave us this date just last week. Why is it different now? Well, it's different because. And they need to be able to understand that and then go to their leadership and say, it's new learning. Right? Well, when does new learning happen? Right? New learning only happens when you give the team enough bandwidth to kind of go out and learn that. If you're just heads on, screens and hands on keyboard, what would have happened in my example is we would have just followed through and gone live and then went, and the team would be fine at that point because they did what they were, quote unquote, led to be, doing, right? And I was almost said instructed, kind of was true.
They did what they were told.
Yeah. So, but the product owner then would be in the line, in the crosshairs, so to speak, right? Because they should have known, but they didn't because they're not technical. The new Scrum guide says the dev team is the developers, the testers, and the product owner. So if we're a team, then the product owner isn't that someone over there. It's not us and them anymore, right? It's us and us. So we need to help them understand ramifications. If we understand them, we need to just say, here, right? I'm going to put my hand up and say, sorry, I told you last week or last month, I'm going to tell you something different because I learned something new. And by the way, give me time to learn something new. It's just tying back to what we were saying earlier. Give us time to go and play a little bit so that we can find these things, right? Because they will save your bacon in the end, so to speak.
You're going off into a product-centric area that I want to go off into. This is going to be my black and white statement that I normally try not to make. Companies are either we'll tell you what to do, we'll tell you what features to implement this feature, add this new form, add this new capability, add barcode to this, add whatever to that. Or they bring the team's problems. Here's a business problem. Customers can't do whatever. Customers can't scan this fast enough. Customers can't do whatever fast enough. Make this process faster. That's what I was trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
It's either one or the other.
Yep.
Either the company's been trained to bring the development team business problems, and then the development team works together to solve the business problem, or the company's been trained to just bring the solution to the dev team and be like, shut up, get back in that chair. I'm not paying you to give me business solutions. Just do what I tell you to do.
You're so right. So companies are either, bring the problem to the people, right? Or bring the people to the problem. It's one or the other. And you can clearly think of some examples. If you've ever used any sort of application or even a website where you look at something and go, why did they think of this? Like it says they only accept these kinds of payments. And then you try one of the accepted payments, and yet it still just doesn't work, but they don't tell you why. It just says something went wrong, try again. You look at that and go, why? You say you take this kind of card or this kind of payment, PayPal, whatever, and I'm using that, and yet it's not working. So you're like, if you're telling me to use one of these and I'm using one of these, I'm in no violation, right, of your requirements, and yet it's not working. Yeah. So what does that say? To me, it says that is a company that said, just go make one payment work, and then, oh yeah, by the way, we have also these other payments. So the team cuts their teeth on one payment, and they simply just say, or this, right? If it's MasterCard or Visa or whatever, I'm just trivializing a little, but not a lot, actually. That's what happens, but the end user's experience is impacted by this. And then you've got people that say, let's just make it work for one card type for now, right? And then here's one more, and here's one more. So they're bringing the problem to the people to the problem. Yeah, it's black and white in my view, right? Companies don't do both typically, and it's behavioral. The older companies have ingrained their psyche into a specific way of thinking, and they just cannot break free. It's hard for them to break free because that tension, right? It's too strong. It just keeps bringing them back.
Well, it's not just that, because the company we worked at was only a B2B company. They only dealt with other companies. And B2B is like, ooh, that's easy street, right? When you start going directly to consumers, and consumers can like go on the App Store and just eviscerate you on the App Store by the hundreds or thousands or whatever. Yeah. And the company came out with a mobile application. And because the planning of the mobile application was driven by leadership in development rather than leadership in the business, what you had to do in order to sign up for the first time to use the application, you had to pay for the application. So if the payment that was part of the registration failed, your whole registration failed. And I, along with the business at the time, my case to the business was just get them in the app. Get them in the app, and then once they're in the app, you say, look, you're in the app, just like any app where you sign up with your email, confirm your email. As long as your email is confirmed, boom, you're in. You can use the app, but you can't do anything until you start paying for it. And then go and add a payment type, add your credit card. I was like, break it up into steps, because development's like, if you can't pay to use the app, why should we let you use the app? That was developer. I understand, but that was their thinking at the time. On the test side, I was coupled with the business, which was let it be easy for them to get the app, just get it on their phone and let it be working. Now, they can't do any transactions because they're not paying yet. But having it working is completely separate from paying. It's a completely separate experience. So when you download an app on your phone, you just want to download it, have it on your phone, go into it, and it works. Okay? But when you want to have microtransactions or whatever, that's a different business. Yep. But development, of course, when development heard it, they were like, well, I mean, you can't, why would you have an app that you can't do anything with? That just doesn't seem right. And we had basically, between the development side of the application and the business side of the application, we had conflicting views. But in that case, there was not a dedicated product owner, because you had the manager of development who had the ability to be like, oh, that's great opinion, product owner, but I own all the developers, so your opinion is just your opinion, and you can You can get out of here with that opinion.
Yeah.
I have to cut out cursing, so it's not. Yeah.
So it is so typical, though, right? You've seen that everywhere.
Yeah.
It's the head honcho on the dev side that makes a decision because they know best, right?
That's exactly what it was.
They have these opinions. They think very highly of themselves. They've never spent the day in the life of a user, much less a product owner.
Right.
This is the issue. So I think what we really need to do. I've got a similar story with a mobile app that was for a credit union, right? For one of the big entertainment industries. Shall remain nameless.
Yes.
They had this application that was working great. If you can use your mobile to log into their website, but the mobile app itself it's very different UI wise, obviously, right? Because different size phones and all of that. Yeah. It's before you even get into Android versus iOS type of deal. The way it was architected was it will work on whatever device you want.
Right.
However, the way it actually was deployed was, if you're already a member and you could log in, and you could actually use it, right, to do your banking, it worked on the phone, etc. But if you were somebody who, for the first time, wanted to sign up, and this was only for employees, so it wasn't even like general public facing, but the employee base is huge. So it's like 80,000 users worldwide. So yeah, as an employee, you can download the app on your iPad, tablet, mobile phone when you sign up. That's great. But when you went on their website, you had to now log in with a different set of credentials. I never understood why, right? And it's because the two sides of the applications were developed by different teams. And the teams were led by different heads that didn't, like dev heads, that didn't see eye to eye.
You're right.
Right? And like, you guys don't know what you've just done to our audience, the end users, right? This is really, really painful.
Yeah.
So the whole point of this organization, the whole point of this was, you don't have to be in front of a computer per se to be able to use the app. You could use it on your mobile.
Yeah.
You've just nullified that whole thing. How does that help? It doesn't help. It's not client facing, but your employees aren't going to think positively of you. So what they're going to do is they're going to say, this thing sucks. I'm just going to go to some other financial institution, take my business over there.
Wow.
Just direct deposit my check over there, please. We wanted to keep that together, and they're doing everything they can to not keep it together, right? And so when this was explained to leadership, they're like, you guys need to get your heads together, which they're right, they do. But the two guys that were in charge of these two separate platforms, they never agreed with each other. And you needed a tiebreaker there. And our CIO then, in the end, became the tiebreaker and said, the whole point of doing this is so we make it easy on our staff, right?
Yeah, well, that person probably should have been involved in the decision from the first place. This is one of those mind-blowing things that had leadership been involved from the beginning, it would have been a really minor thing. But because middle managers were just shutting down even the conversation, that's one of the reasons for the pain.
We talked last on another podcast, I think.
Yeah, we did.
Point. Like, it's got to hurt before they take action, right? Otherwise, it's too smooth. Everything's going well. Everything's hunky-dory, right?
Yeah,
Have a great weekend.
Like, you've caused so much stress in your teams at that point.
Yeah.
Like, why?
Right. Absolutely. The teams are the ones that suffer in the end.
Right.
But, it hurts the organization, and then they take action.
Yeah.
That's what I feel. Until it hurts, they don't, they just let things go. Everything's going well, right?
Yeah, especially...
People say the right things at meetings. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Like they project their PowerPoints, and everything's going well, we're on track. Everything's going well. Yeah, it really isn't.
Yeah, especially with QA, no one really wants to listen to them a lot of time, or you'll find tons of bugs, and they'll be like, oh, we'll fix it later. And then that's when the pain starts happening, when they're like, why didn't this get fixed? It's like, it's right here in the backlog. We wrote this up forever ago. It's hard for QA to have priority in these kind of things.
Yeah, we must talk about this every single podcast, I swear. And it's only made a lot more difficult when QA is shuffled underneath development's budget / management.
What would happen, though, if QA was working under product instead?
It should be under product because I've been under development, and let's say you come up with a new product. come up with a new product, introduce it. Your QA person in the sprint identifies a million bugs, right? And development is going to say, why are you testing that? Why'd you look at that? That wasn't one of the things we changed this sprint, right? You're gonna have a bunch of non-productive conversations. The more productive conversation would be to bring the QA person into alignment with how the product person and following the business is looking at the product, to say, listen, I need you to test like a user would test. And if it's difficult to get the mindset of the user, maybe we can talk to a user. Maybe we can talk to a few users. Maybe we can talk about some of the critical functions. Maybe we sit together and figure out where the critical paths through the application are, and we can start from there. Maybe I'm not representing both sides equally. There's a lot more to be gained sitting with product than sitting with development. I think sitting with development, you're basically following them on all the stories that they're working on.
You won't get any argument from
You're
me
basically
on that,
doing unit
right?
testing at that point. You're just doing manual unit testing.
Yeah,
Because they don't need you. They can automate their own unit tests.
sure.
I think another way to help solve that is TDD/BDD.
Oh yeah.
Even in unit tests, your test what the user would do, or the end point of what that small unit is supposed to do, instead of just testing the insides of that, like, oh, if I add 2 + 2 = 4 kind of thing, or it's going to be more towards what a QA person would test anyway, even though it's a unit test.
And like before you even start coding, you sit with a developer and help them walk through. These are the things you should be looking at, and you'll cut a lot of effort off the back end by just sitting together when they're planning. Maybe they haven't even written code.
And in my previous job, one of the principal software engineers was really trying to push something. He gave a different name, but it's like Three Amigos catalog mobbing, something like that. Test catalog mobbing, where one person from the QA, the business, and the developer would get together and basically form test cases, and everyone would code to that, make tests for that, and things like that. So everyone has a clear-cut idea of what the end function of whatever it is that we're making is.
Yeah, I've heard it. The Holy Trinity.
Whatever, however many
Trio,
different names.
Three Amigos.
Sure.
Yeah, I've heard it a bunch of different ways. I've heard that, but it all breaks down to the same point. You should involve the team.
Yeah.
You should involve the team every step of the way.
Right.
I mean, like, this goes back to continuous learning. I've been a Scrum Master and a product owner before, so I kind of know the expertise of my team members. So I'll say, hey, I need you to figure this out. I know this other person has done something along the same lines. Why don't you work together and figure it out and get me a solution? I don't word it that way, but that's basically my intent is, figure out a solution. We need to bring this back to the business. For example, in the very real problem that I had at a client with the database problem where I couldn't scale my database, the QA guy was very well aware of why the database would not scale. He had a good depth of SQL skill at the time. And he would get with the developers and they would talk about, we really need to refactor these tables, but in lieu of refactoring these tables, because it's going to take a lot of work and it's going to touch all these modules, here's the things we can do. We can index this, we can do this, we can build a temp table for this. And I would put it on the team to be like, well, what can we do in 2 weeks was one sprint for us. What can we do in 2 weeks to impact performance in this example?
At the end of the day, you have business-centric folks in that role, and their role is to simply deliver value to the business. I think the team, on the other hand, really needs to feel free to say, this is how things should work when it comes to technology.
Right.
And if we don't do it this way, what does it mean? So you just simply explain that to POs, most POs, pretty much anybody in the business, quote unquote, in a language that they don't understand, it's going to go over their heads, right? Yeah. So you can talk about things like, database optimization or, reindexing, this and that. That means nothing to them. Speak to them in their own language. What does it mean? We're going to make performance improvements by 20%. What does that mean to the end user of our product, right? Those things actually hit home much better than we're going to add an index to this table. So who cares what you add to that table? The POs don't understand it.
Well, the PO may not be able to follow. They may not be able to follow.
Right.
For me, since I'm writing the story, I will write the story in the way where it makes sense to everybody upstream that I'm talking to say, what is the team working on now that's so important that you can't deal with my silly sales requests or whatever? And I'll be like, well, the team is working on making sure that whenever this type of user connects to the database, they get a response back in, very quickly, as opposed to now where they have to wait 20 seconds. Hey, on all your sales demos where you do X and Y and Z and it takes you 20 seconds and you have to do a little tap dance while the customer's on the phone. We're taking care of that. We're getting rid of that and it won't happen anymore. Oh, that'd be great. That'd be amazing.
So you're actually relaying the benefits in a language they understand,
right?
And that's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
is
but I'm reinterpreting.
important.
Yeah, right. Like the team should have the skill.
Yeah. The teams don't have the skill though.
Okay, well, the
right?
teams.
Somebody on the team has to have the skills. Sometimes it's a good BA that understands it. Sometimes it's a Scrum Master that understands it. Sometimes, very rarely is it a developer who understands it and could do the translation, right? Developers, we don't really expect them to be able to relay this knowledge in a business-centric language. We expect them to say, do the technical stuff, right? So improve performance by adding an index. For us, then, it behooves us to say, if she is doing that, what does that mean to the business?
Yeah.
And to your point, telling people that delay you have, right, when you're doing a demo, we're improving it by 50%, whatever the message is, that hits home.
Yeah.
That's when they say, oh yeah, I see the value in what you're doing. Yeah. Most POs aren't able to do that translation,
but
sadly.
See, this is why I could talk for the rest of the night on QA engineer chat, because anybody who sits under the banner of QA, they have to be able to walk both sides.
Yeah.
But the point was writing and carrying out stories that can speak both languages, that can talk to the teams and can properly advocate for those stories up to the business. We went on that tangent because I started talking about, like, you learn by yourself. Sure, everyone learns by themselves. The best people, will learn by themselves. But have you been on teams before where the team encourages you to learn or gives you time to learn? This is probably like the 80-20 rule. Like 80% of the teams I've been on just are like, when is it going to be done? How much is it going to cost? I don't care about whether you have to take time to learn. So just don't tell me. It's not built in.
Yeah, it's almost accidental in many cases, right? So 80%, that 80% case is my experience as well, pretty close, right?
Yeah.
And that's because you've had the hierarchy there. You've had the team, the development team.
Yeah.
You've got the product owner. To me, that's not a hierarchy. To me, that's just the team right now, right? But then you have a project manager who is now tallying hours and all of that, right? Billings and whatnot. So now you get into this discussion with the team, and then the product owner is inevitably involved. Oh yeah, we have this thing called innovation time, right? Oh, what is that? No, that's not. I can't budget that. That's not right. So it's like immediately has clamped down. No, you're not doing that. It's like, okay, then in that case,
budget your way right out of my project.
Yeah, right.
Then.
So then it's careful. What you
budget
measure.
your way right out of my office. Get out of here.
We've had that as a different topic on a podcast.
Yeah.
So then what happens is the teams go, if we're going to need to find out and we're not allowed to go research, we're just going to pad our estimates. And that's what happens is that's the behavior you beget.
Right.
So now everybody's going to inflate their estimates. And you get this artificial kind of performance metric. Oh yeah, we're doing fine. No, you're not. You could be doing so much better, right? So that's what I call that inbuilt latency, and we've had that on the podcast before. There's inertia and there's latency. And inertia is the willingness or the lack of willingness. The latency is purely the time aspect of it. You have both of those combined when you have these layers, especially in a PMO environment, right? In a PMO environment, you can't mention the word innovation. There's no room for that. There's only room for, here's the project plan, go execute on it. It's like, no one's done this before. This is new work. We're knowledge workers. It's not a factory or, we can't stamp out widgets on a predictable time horizon, right? This is new stuff. And so 20% is when I've seen people that say, this is new stuff, go figure it out. It takes what it takes, right? But at the same time, there's guardrails in place where teams just don't go off on a tangent and just pursue the next shiny thing.
The story earlier where I was a product owner and I had automated the administrator's style login and test, I could do it very quickly because I had all those scripts in PowerShell. But I was like, PowerShell. Well, PowerShell's kind of old. Let me do it in Python. I basically rewrote all those scripts from scratch in Python, and they did all the same thing. Of course, they were like, a third the size because they were in Python. But like, I did all that on my own time, without asking for permission, without checking, making time in the backlog or what. I just did it on nights and weekends, basically. The nights and weekends planned. It wasn't something built in with that team. I mean, I guess I was a product owner at that point, so I could have made time to push my team to be like, hey, get me something that's reusable.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have had to fight with the business to make that a big thing.
Yeah, I did something similar with where I am now, where they're doing everything in JavaScript, JavaScript and Go. Yeah. And I came from Java, so I still had to take, about not even a week just to get back into JavaScript,
right.
Because it's just taking that little bit of time just to look at a couple of docs and be like, oh, okay, this is basically like the same kind of thing here. It's a lot easier to learn than people think that it is. And I think that's a big thing that people don't understand, is that they feel like it's this huge task of like, oh, there's just so much stuff. And it's like, well, just focus on one thing, and it makes it a lot easier to start learning something.
I know.
And they think of it as a whole, and that it just blows their minds.
When I'm doing something for the first time, I maintainability. Like, I'm just trying to make it work, man. Like, and then once I prove that it works, it passes whatever conditions I'm trying to do. Like, then I cut and paste it out. Like, it's a terrible way of developing. I'm not saying
it isn't, though. It isn't.
It is for me, because usually you cut and paste it and then nothing works.
That word, maintainability. So when I was working on a project, they would encourage people to keep it simple.
Yeah.
Because of that fact. It's maintainable. It's understandable by others. I mean, this is a huge project. So they're like, okay, if you do something that's just so mysterious, but it gives the right results, great, but nobody understands it. Mm-hmm. We can't maintain it. If you win the lottery tomorrow and you're gone, what do we do? Right. Keep it simple. And it was encouraged, very strongly encouraged, to keep things really, really simple. They didn't look at efficiency of coding. They looked at effectivity. Big difference, right? Yeah. So there's merit both ways.
That'd be nice, looking at effectiveness rather than efficiency on a development team. We talk about that one all the time.
We do.
All right, Om, I want to try to put a pin in this topic to ask, how can a developer who's a team member, or really a Scrum Master or a PO, or it could be anyone who's a team member, how can they push for a more learning-focused, learning-inclusive culture, even if it's just in their team? Because if you have one of these teams that are just, what do we talk about? Capacity utilization, whatever we say. It's like, oh, you got to be 85%, 7.25 hours of your day or whatever. When they were like counting your time, like that level of ridiculousness, obviously it's not going to work. But rather than me spending nights and weekends to try to figure out how to get some kind of information out of the system or how to automate something or whatever, is there a way that you can do this or affect this change or start pushing for this at a team level, so where the team encourages this type of learning rather than people are just shouldering it on their own time?
It's a great question. So I think if the team didn't do it, I don't anticipate the business or anybody else saying, hey, I think you guys need to go innovate a little. No one's going to do that, right? Mm-hmm. Because as a company, the focus is on immediate value, like ROI.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, how it manifests itself in many cases, to your point, is utilization. They think, and that's measuring busyness, right?
Yeah, but can we give people, like anyone listening to this, can we give them a strategy? But as a Scrum Master lobby, to just be like, well, one day a week we're going to reserve 6 hours, whatever, like 6 hours a sprint. You know what I mean? In a 2-week sprint, we're going to take 6 hours, and that's going to be the day to do whatever.
I think you can. I think a savvy Scrum Master would say,
it's probably more than that.
Let me look at my team, right? And when a Scrum Master projects capacity for the sprint, they could easily deduct a little bit from that and say 4 hours, let's say, every Friday or whatever day, pick a day that works for everyone. We're going to get together as a team and not work on any stories necessarily, but we're going to go and brainstorm on how we can learn. And these techniques that we learn will better allow us to deliver stories in the next sprint or in future sprints. Yeah. The Scrum Master needs to, first of all, petition that, and then stand up and defend it and say, these 4 hours are not a waste.
Yeah.
It's an investment. And it's an investment because the team is learning, right? So if the organization and that culture is one of even a semi-learning culture, they will try it.
Mm-hmm.
But as a Scrum Master, if you say every sprint, we're going to take 4 hours a week, that's 8 hours, that's a day, times, let's say, 7 people, whatever number of people you have,
Right.
that's a huge chunk. You think about that, right? That's a huge chunk. So the business may say, well, no, you should be delivering us real stories during that time.
Yeah.
So instead of doing it that way, if you really want to like plant the seed and nurture it, as a Scrum Master, I would say, don't do that, but treat this as an experiment.
Mm-hmm.
An experiment allows the freedom to fail,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it says it's an experiment. If it doesn't work, well, we'll pivot. It's not a permanent thing. So
Yeah.
not every sprint we're going to do is, how about we try it for a sprint or two?
Yeah.
Sell that to the business. If they buy that, and then, of course, having sold it, come back and show the value. Here's what we
Yeah.
learned. What does that mean? Well, it means we can deliver these kinds of stories faster, or whatever the learning actually allows you to contribute, right, to the business. Be vocal about it, show that off, showcase it.
Yeah.
That helps your case, because now what you can do is say, this experiment is working, right? We're going to keep it going for 2 more sprints. So now what started off as a spark is now 4 sprints along, because you started with 2 and you added 2 more. That's how I think you embed it. I don't think you just go in and just say, this is what we're going to do now. That's my recommendation.
Yeah.
I'd be interested in hearing from the viewers what they find,
Oh, that'd be
that
interesting.
works for them.
I've been on a team where that did happen, and we got some time every sprint for dedicated to learning. I think what ended up happening there is that I think it was just more so that team is working on things that are kind of like high priority for a legacy system. And even though that time was carved out, I feel like the team members ended up not using it because they felt they were pressured to finish 2-week sprint deadlines, and they didn't feel like they could take that time to do that learning. Even though it was carved out for them, they felt like they were going to miss finishing work if they did that.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, well, we don't want to push this back, so we're just going to not do this learning time.
Yeah,
and that kind of being a every sprint kind of thing. So
That's how you get back to the nights and weekends plan.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you end up, either you take your normal time to do your learning, and then your normal work gets pushed to nights and weekends, or the opposite.
Yeah.
Now you're doing your learning or whatever improvement on the nights and weekends. Or quite honestly, like you only do that for so long until you just don't want to work nights and weekends anymore. And then you stop one of 2 things. You either stop your normal work, turn it in on time, or you stop your learning.
Right.
You stop trying to innovate, and you just kind of do what you can and punch a clock. And I've had even when I was a manager, I had people who work for me that were just punching a clock because they knew that like my reward for going above and beyond and doing extra work is just more work.
More work, yeah. So if you're a person who enjoys learning and you see value from that, but the organization is not encouraging it, it can only go one way. You're going to get frustrated and you're going to leave.
You're going to leave,
People lose
Yeah, of course.
valuable members of the team because of that.
Or you're going to lose the best people from the team because those are the people that have knowledge and skills over and above what
And
the other team
eagerness
members.
to learn. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Right.
You're spot on.
When I was a manager, the way that I helped make sure that this was happening was I never allowed my team members' utilization to go above a certain percentage on a project. That's what I don't remember what the utilization was. I'm pretty sure it was like 50%, which was like always a point of fist fighting with my leadership above me. Like, oh my God, Brian, you won't let a QA person be utilization more than 50%? That's ridiculous. And of course, I being me would be like, well, you're ridiculous. And I wouldn't bring it up in a helpful manner in any way, shape, or form. But I knew if you were only 50% dedicated to project work, air quotes, project work, that means that I could absolutely assure that you would have 20% of your time available to exactly what we're talking about, learning time. Even if I'm going to deduct company meetings, department meetings, one-on-ones, whatever, even all that stuff is only 5%, right? So you still have a 20% just free bandwidth built into your schedule. That was sort of like the magic number for me as a manager. Is like, if my person is dedicated to a project 50%, And I know that it takes 20% learning overhead and a 5% departmental budget for just nonsense, administrative. We'll call it administrative overhead.
Yep.
That still leaves 20% free. So their real load is 80%. Company-wide, project-wide, whatever. And that's kind of how I balanced the subject of what we're talking about with everything else. But at that point, I was like you can equate it to like a team lead in a larger organization, right? I'm responsible for these people, but I'm not responsible for any of the projects they're on, just the people, right?
So it's a matrixed organization.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah, I think the numbers are important because if you go into most organizations and say, my team's only going to be 50% utilized on project work, right?
Yeah.
That would be frowned upon, I would say,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
On the other hand, and I'm not suggesting you do anything different using specifically that example you just cited. I would say my team is 75% utilized, knowing that 75 is inclusive of this learning, right? And so when it comes to planning your sprint, you would block off that. You would say, this is learning time. We only have this much available. You can only fill the bucket to the top,
Right.
and that's it. So if you do it that way, those that don't understand what you're doing aren't hung up on the numbers. Because
Right.
50 as a number is particularly relevant. I mean, they look at that and they're fixated on that and go, you're only doing half the work, right? Half the time? I
Right.
say, no,
Right.
that's not what we're saying. So your example didn't say your teams are only working 50%. It didn't
Right.
say that, but that's how they hear it,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
So that's why I would say, let's just say 75, it sits better. But the 75 is inclusive of that learning time, which, by the way, is not negotiable, right? Because to the example
Right.
you said earlier, what happens is one sprint they go, no, well, we're going to forsake that because we're just full on. Next sprint we're going to do that. Well, it's a slippery slope, right? Before long, you're not doing what you should be doing, and
Yeah.
nobody questions that
Yep.
because it becomes the expectation. So I would say, just use the numbers to your advantage.
And you're absolutely right. That starts a lot of fights
Right.
behind the scenes, manager level, inside the organization of, how come I can't do this in my plan and make my plan look nice? And this is messing up the way my plan looks. But it's not affecting anything different in reality. It is messing up how nice their plan looks, which is messing up how good they look to management at the beginning of a project.
Right.
It has nothing to do with the end of the project.
Yeah. So if you have a PMO in your organization, they're going to budget your team members 100% of their
Oh, yeah.
availability.
Yeah, you got to get ahead of that.
Most times they use the software where it just says, this person's full time, 8 hours, 40 hours, whatever. That's how they work. Not that they can not adopt that. It's just a mindset issue, right? They've grown up that way.
Yeah.
And the tool allows you to, so that's what they're going to do. And they say, well, aren't they on my project full time? Yeah, they are, but what does full time really mean, right?
Right.
So you get into these discussions, and it becomes a mindset issue. Full time to them means 8 hours solid on this task, and they just line up those tasks and on a Gantt chart, and they go, "That's the day you're going live," right? And you go, "I don't know what time I'm going to get home today. There's too many variables, right? I know what time I get home." On average, I could give you a range. They like to have a nice project plan that looks good, to your point, to leadership. They go sell that. God forbid if there's a deviation from that, right? And then they fight it downhill, meaning they'll just question the teams. What do you mean you can't go live on that day? I've already told leaders, I've had that so many times where people have told me, you can't say no now. I've already told that to leadership.
I wish that reasoning worked in real life.
It-
Oh, did you make a bad promise? Well, now you get to go back and unmake that bad promise.
Exactly, right. It doesn't work very well in real life, but it doesn't stop us from trying, right?
They just say, no, I'm not doing that. And they walk away.
They do. They walk away and they go, well, it's, you can shout as much as you like. It's going to get done when it's going to get done.
That's a great tactic. You just be like, no, I'm not unmaking the promise. Goodbye. And then you walk away.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I don't know. I agree with you. I think we need to kind of play the game a little bit. That's what I'm saying. We can't just say, you're only getting this person 50% or 60% because I think we've got to be somewhat economical sometimes with the truth and go, yeah, you can have them for 75%, but that includes 15% of learning time. And no, that is not negotiable.
Yeah,
Right.
I think we just hit another tactic that wasn't even in my question. My question was like, well, how can developers or scrum masters, team members basically, how can they help to make sure that you have time carved out? But what we just hit on is the management or the leads of your organization can have a huge impact to go to whoever's creating timelines. Honestly, I don't know who it is. Could be the product owners, could be whatever, whoever the middle managers are in your organization. To set an expectation with them to say, look, you need to assume that my people have a 20% overhead over and above whatever you're scheduling. So take that into consideration, because I need to make sure they have time for learning, they have time to develop their skills, they have time for, when I need them to do whatever as a manager, and to build that in.
Yeah, I mean, there's things they need to do other than learning too. What about team building, right? Things like that.
Right.
So,
right.
it's especially important now because most people are remote. You don't actually get to see people. So you need to consciously spend time building your team. And if you don't do that, the effectivity again goes down, right? So yeah, people can defend their efficiency all they want, but it doesn't really help the organization any. It actually hinders them. They just don't see that.
Mm-hmm. So shoot for the stars, and then be willing to negotiate for less.
Well, yeah. So
I started at 50%. And
shoot for the stars, and if you land on the moon, you're okay.
Yeah. Well, that's a good way to wrap up this. Shoot for the stars, and if you land on the moon, you win.
Yep. Let us know what you think. Subscribe and like us down there somewhere, and let us know what topics you want to talk about, and we'll be more than happy to indulge.